Hello, welcome to my channel, Inflightmuzik. My name is Ian, and today I'm going to go over the melody in Let Me See by GCJ featuring Kevin Gates and Lil Skies. I think it sounded like I said little, but I meant to say Lil. Anyway, here's the MIDI that I came up with in terms of just the main melody. And I have 4 different layers going. Really, it's 2 main layers for the main melody, but also in the song there's a melody breakdown where the main melody kind of goes out and then this other sound comes in, but it's playing the same melody. I think it actually sounds cool when I'm playing all of them at the same time, so I'm just going to do that for you real quick. Okay, so one of my most popular videos on this channel is actually my dark melody tutorial, and this actually follows a lot of what I talk about in that tutorial. I've actually decided that I'm going to do a part 2 of that tutorial because I have some other tips and tricks for you, and I want to give you guys some free MIDI that is going to help you out more than the tutorial itself. So that's coming soon in the near future. Definitely give me a thumbs up if you want to see that tutorial, or let me know in the comments below. And I'll drop it sooner than later if I get a big rush of people that are wanting to see that. But really, I bring up that tutorial because this melody does break that rule, and that's because this melody isn't completely dark. It's not the darkest melody that you could possibly hear. But in that video, I asked you guys to try to find a way to break that rule, and this melody right here does that. And the way that it does it is a tip that I give in another video. I can't remember what video it was, but basically there's something called the tonic, which is basically the main note that you're going to be using to build your melody off of. And that actually determines the mode of the song. So say, for example, you're playing in C major, which is considered to be a happy sounding scale. Well, if you start the scale on E, meaning if you start playing notes starting on E and you build up your melody from there, well, that's actually called the Phrygian mode, and that will actually give you a darker sound than starting on C. The reason behind that is because now your tonal, or your new root note, so to speak, is E and no longer C, even though you're using all of the same notes, which is, again, that's something that I want to cover in more detail in a future video if I do a second dark melody tutorial, because there's something that I cover in the first video, but I want to re-emphasize and make a lot clearer for you guys. If you want me to give you guys a hint, it's basically using what's called a hexatonic scale. I tried looking up the notes that I've showed you guys in that video, and I don't want to jump the gun, but basically it's something that I've made up. I can't find anything online that refers back to this. There is a such thing as hexatonic scales, but the one that I've been showing you, I don't think has been named or mentioned before. So when I release that video, I'm going to go over what the hexatonic scale is and exactly why it's so useful for trap melodies, specifically dark trap melodies. So first, let's go over the different presets that I'm using here. Once again, I'm using all expand. 4 different layers of expand. So this really tells you how useful expand is. If you haven't bought this yet, I mean, it's a $20 VST. I hate to tell you guys what the price used to be because it used to be even cheaper than this, but it's going up in price because of the demand for it. So get it now before it goes back to full price, which it most definitely will, which will cost you $130 instead of $20. There are some crazy presets in here, and I'm definitely going to do a video on what I consider as the best presets in expand for dark melodies or trap in general, but it's loaded with them. I'd say maybe 30%, maybe even 40% of these presets are great for the genre. And then if you actually go in and start editing some of the other presets, I'd say almost all of them can be used for the genre. You just have to know what you're doing with the effects and tweaking the smart knobs and even tweaking the actual presets themselves. But anyway, the first preset that I have here is under the bells section. It's called Bright Bells. So let me just play that for you by itself. And the next one that I have here is Heavenly Bell Pad. That's actually in the soft pad section. This bank in particular is loaded with these presets. Let's go to this next preset. I'll just play it for you real quick. So this is what I chose for the breakdown that they do in the beat, and that's also under soft pads, and it's called The Arrival. And then I layered that with this for the breakdown as well. It's called Bioluminescence, and I think this is under soft pads as well. Yep, sure is. Just a quick tip for any pad in general. You can make any pad into a lead and any lead into a pad. Just adjust the attack setting. So you'll see that this attack setting is kind of halfway up there. Well, if you just bring this down all the way, all of a sudden it's a bell. Back in the day when I owned a Phantom X, really I messed around with 3 knobs: the attack, the release, and the cutoff filter. I would use the attack to turn pads into leads and turn leads into pads. So that basically doubled the preset count that I had. And then I would adjust the release. If you adjust the release shorter with the attack really short, now you have plucks, like a bell or like a piano or like keys in general. And then extending the release can make sounds more like strings, where it just has this long delay in when the sound stops playing. And then the third knob that I would mess around with was the cutoff. And the cutoff would make any sound darker or brighter. So I would typically just have the cutoff right in the middle on my keyboard, and then I would either darken the sound or brighten the sound depending on what specific frequency range I was trying to hit, which is another good tip. Anytime you're trying to layer a bunch of sounds or create multiple melodies in a song, go ahead and think about the frequency ranges that sound is hitting. You want something in the lower register, the mid lows, the mids, the mid highs, and then maybe the highs as well. If you think in those terms, it'll be easier for you to start picking sounds in general. Okay, so now let me just play the melody breakdown. Okay, so let's get back into the melody itself. You'll see that these notes are kind of all over the place. So I'm gonna delete all these middle notes, all these top notes, and we're just gonna focus on this bottom note right here. You'll notice that the tempo is at 140. That's the tempo that I reached when I tested it out with, let me see. So I usually play in E minor / G major, and this song actually is in E minor. And basically all we're doing is creating a bass rhythm. So let's just listen to what this sounds like. You could create really complex melodies by starting with just one note. This bottom note is going to dictate everything else that all the rest of the notes do. So what this bottom note actually represents is the main minor chord inside of E minor. So you'll see that it's playing the note E. So anytime you go into any of your minor scales, so D, E, F, G, whatever minor, focus on that actual note and start your bass note on that and just create a rhythm. After you've already selected your tempo, you're gonna be able to really feel a certain groove off of that. So really kind of treat this like a percussive instrument instead of a melodic instrument starting out. Just put in a natural rhythm, just like you would do with any of your other drums. And you'll notice that for this 8 bars, this just repeats 4 times. So you don't want a crazy rhythm that just changes up over and over again. You want something that's memorable. That's gonna be the foundation of all of your melody. Okay, so from there you would just add in the middle portion, and basically right here, I'm starting out with the note that completes the chord. Basically for the chord you would have E, G, and B for your main minor chord in E minor. Something that I like to do when I'm actually playing is ignoring the middle note of the chord, and that's going to help you create more openness in your melodies. So if you stop worrying about the middle note in the chord and trying to hit every single note, then you'll have a little more freedom when it comes to creating the chord. I'm not saying that never play the middle note. I'm just saying focus more on the bottom and the top note of the chord when you're making your melodies. Because one secret about chords, it's really the top and the bottom note that really makes the sound. The way the human ear works, you actually fill in that gap mentally already when someone doesn't play that middle note. So you'll kind of already hear that middle note on its own. There's probably some science behind it, because in my brain, I almost feel like when you combine those two notes, the frequencies when they come together actually create the frequency of that middle note. So when you actually play that middle note, it just re-emphasizes what you're hearing. But let's go ahead and play just this beginning part, and you'll hear the syncopation between the bottom and the top of the chord. So it's just syncopation. You're just alternating between the two notes. So that part's really easy. So then we get into the second part of the melody, and you can hear that we started off while playing two notes at the same time. And basically when you play two notes at the same time, after you've done a syncopation, it just places a little punch, a little emphasis on the new notes that you're adding. So you'll see that the notes that are layered on top of these bass notes are notes that are outside of that chord. So when you do that, it actually just plays towards the melody a little bit better than layering just the notes that are within the chord on top of each other. So if I were to do that, it would just sound like I'm playing a chord. But instead, it just sounds like a new part of the melody instead. Let's play that all together. So it just feels a lot more melodic than if you were just restricting yourself to the notes in the chord. And once again, we're just repeating that 4 times throughout this 8 bars. So again, you're not looking for crazy complications, trying to do too much at once. I would say when it comes to these lower notes and the middle notes in your entire melody, those are the notes that should stay more consistent. If you want to start moving around and switching stuff up, you want to do that with the higher frequencies, the ear candy, if you want to call it that, which is exactly what we do with this top melody. So let's add that in. And now let's just listen back to what this sounds like when we add in the top part of the melody. The first note that you'll notice is this bottom note of this top melody right here. And basically all that is doing is just playing an octave. So that's a nice little trick that you can add in to just add more emphasis to the beginning of your melody. Just playing, if you need more frequencies, just more energy at the very beginning of your melody, just play the octave of the first note that you're playing. And in this case, like I said, we're starting out with E minor, so we're using E as our first note versus it just has a little more feeling, a little more power. It's just emphasizing that main bass note. And then with the next note, we're actually completing the chord. So we're playing the top note of the chord, which is a really cool thing to do after you've been syncopating between the bass note and the top note of the chord. Now you're playing the bass note and the top note of the chord at the same time for the second note of the melody. So now that should start giving you ideas in terms of how to be a little creative when you're purposely putting in notes for a melody. So you're thinking about the top and the bottom note of the chord, when to play them, and the rhythm of how you're playing them. Syncopating them, playing them together, going an octave apart, or using the top part of the melody to play them together. All of those are different ideas that all work. So what's great about this melody is that it's combining all these different techniques or all these different ideas that really create a very interesting melody for you to listen to without getting bored so quickly. And that's just the first 2 notes of this melody, and already it sounds pretty cool. And again, we just continue on with the syncopation. In this next note, you'll see that once again, we're going off of the chord, and this plays by itself. So it really stands out, and that's a good thing to do in the top part of the melody, because that's really the ear candy, the main thing that people are going to be listening to. So we go from there to playing the root note once again, the tonic, and that tonic really stands out because now that is the highest note in the melody. So now we're re-emphasizing the bass note, the tonic note in the chord, by using it as the highest note in the melody, which is super, super common in trap music. So whenever you're making these melodies and you already know what your bottom note is, Think about using that as the highest note in your melody as well, but not doing it over and over again. You could see that we literally only do this once every 2 bars. So it only happens 4 times throughout an 8-bar loop. So the very first time that I listened to this song, these 2 notes right here really, really stood out to me. That's because we went from this dark to a more melancholic sound. And I don't really know if that's the right word, but basically this is where this is breaking the rule of my dark melody tutorial, because we're using this note right here within the E minor scale, and that's the note that you would want to avoid to keep your melodies dark. The trick with this entire melodic progression is that by emphasizing the tonic, which is E, and basically sticking to all the other notes that are available in the dark melody, just by playing this note that makes the melody happy, or happier I should say, just by playing it once and going right back into the top of our main minor chord, it just quickly goes from really dark, really dark, really dark to, okay, now something's different, but we're back to being dark again almost immediately. That's also something that I covered in, it was how to make melodies out of your chords tutorial. Definitely check that one out as well. But basically, when you glide from a note that's actually outside of the scale and go back into the scale, you can make those notes outside of the scale work. I would say that's the very first lesson that you should learn whenever you want to use notes that are outside of the scale. So if we're pretending that the scale that we're using here is the hexatonic scale that I'm going to teach you later on, where you're only using 6 notes. This is the note that I would consider outside of that 6-note scale. Well, we're just playing that once and going quickly back into one of the notes inside of the hexatonic scale. And here it's surrounded by notes that are in the minor chord. So we got the top part of the minor chord, then it syncopates down to the bottom note of the minor chord, which is playing at the same exact time as this brighter note. And then we're going back into the darkness of the minor chord, playing the top of it and the bottom of it at the same time. So if you haven't figured out how to utilize those brighter chords within your dark melodies, this is telling you right here. This is the formula right here. By focusing on all of the dark notes and then just adding it in really quick, just once, maybe twice within the melody. And then basically this just continues on following all those rules or not rules, but all those guidelines that we just went over. So you'll see that we're playing all the notes that are inside of the E minor chord most often, and then we're just sprinkling in notes here and there that are outside of those chords. We're focusing on the notes in the chord, syncopating them, and then whenever you play notes at the same time, that's usually when we're playing notes that are outside of the chord. Here we have it by itself, but here we have it layered with our tonic, here layered with the tonic, here by itself, layered with the tonic here, layered with the tonic, and here by itself. So only 2 or 3 times do we have notes outside of the chord just playing by themselves. And when we do that, we're immediately going right back into the chord. And then at the very end, you could hear a little turnaround where you could hear that the loop is done and it's about to loop around. So let me just play this end. So there's tension right there. And that's because this is the only part of the melody where we play this note right here and we go back into the middle note of the chord. And once again, I already told you that when you play the top and the bottom note of the chord, it already sounds complete. You could already fill in the gap of what that chord is. But when you play the note in the middle, which is what's going on right here, so we played a note outside and then in the middle, even though it's being played with the tonic, you don't quite hear the chord. You're missing it. You're trying to think, oh, what's about to happen? When you hear that, it builds tension. That allows you to want the loop to loop back around and start over again, where we hit this tonic an octave apart right here and here. So it just brings it back full circle to what we want to hear. So let's listen to that again, and you can hear the tension build up if I pause it right before it loops back around. You'll want it to loop back around. Definitely want to hear this, or you definitely want to hear this. That sounds like it finished. As soon as you hear that note, it feels done, but it's actually the beginning of the loop. So that's a nice little trick that a lot of trap music will do with their melodies by building that tension up by using notes that are either outside of the chord or using that middle note that's in the chord instead of finishing your melody with the bottom or the top note of the chord. So that's a lot of different techniques, tips, and tricks in this melody here. As soon as I heard the song, I immediately thought this is a perfect song for you guys to learn a lot about syncopation, a lot about using notes inside and outside of the chord, tension and release, resolution, jumping octaves. That's a whole lot going on right here. And that's why I love trap music, because back in the day when we're listening to a lot of boom bap and a lot of just old school hip hop in general, we had a lot of repetitive melodies, and I used to hate hip hop. That's why I was a huge Jay-Z fan growing up. That was the first, Jay-Z Volume 2 was the first hip hop album I ever bought. And that was it was mainly because of Timbaland. And Timbaland is a guy that really focuses a lot on his rhythm, percussion, and gets a lot into using unique sounds. And with those unique sounds come pretty unique melodies. And that's just something that was missing in hip hop for a really long time for me. And I didn't necessarily like the sound of sampled music back then. Sampled music in the 90s, a lot of times it was literally just a sample. It wasn't flipped in any way, you know? Like it was just a loop that was playing from an old song. And that wasn't fun to listen to for me. But as soon as trap came along, I felt like finally these guys are doing what I've been wanting to do, or basically what I was trying to do myself on my Phantom back in the day. Like I said, a lot of my influence was Timbaland based. I also liked the Neptunes, you know, Pharrell and Chad. It's funny because all of these guys were from Virginia. At the time, I didn't know it. I swear there was like something in the water out there in terms of hip hop and melody and just adding new rhythm to the sound. But I remember being in college and listening to T.I. for the first time. Yeah, so basically if you asked me who invented trap music, which was a huge hot topic the past couple of years, specifically last year, honestly, for me, it was T.I. But I'm not going to say that he literally invented trap music, but that was the first time that I heard music like that. And it was definitely from T.I. And even if we said that someone else invented it, I mean, for me, he was who made it popular. He was the one that made it mainstream to the point where I definitely liked the beats that he was choosing. I mean, really the beats that he was rapping on were just freaking phenomenal to me. That's why I liked the Dirty South. That's why I liked trap music in general, because of what the music was actually doing inside of the production. But yeah, all these different layers are doing the same exact thing, so really I don't have to really get into those. I mean, it's literally just copied and pasted into doing the same thing. One thing that I did forget to tell you guys, on this track right here, I have a plugin called Unstable. This is a free plugin by De La Mancha. Basically does what Isotope Vinyl does. I like the sound of both. I wish this was 64-bit. Isotope Vinyl is 64-bit. Both are free, so, I mean, use whatever you want. They'll do the same thing. Unstable is pretty subtle, so let me turn it off and I'll turn it back on. That's without it, and then with it. It's just perfect in terms of what I was looking for to layer on top of the other bells. It just kind of adds what that signature sound is right now in trap music. Just that slight detuned feeling. It kind of lends itself to that ominous tone to what trap music typically is nowadays, or typically has always been. But yeah, that's the only effect that I have on any of these. On this very last one, on those pads, I have a high pass, low pass filter on it. That's about it. All the other ones are just, I just have going as is. So yeah, that pretty much covers all the different melodic ideas, the different elements, the different techniques that I heard inside of Let Me See, the new song by GCJ, Kevin Gates, and Lil Skies. So if you like this video, give it a thumbs up, leave me a comment down below, and subscribe if you haven't already. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.